Today we are in Madrid at Tyba. Eiso, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, my name is Eiso Kant and I'm the managing director here at Tyba. And my day-to-day responsibilities vary, but our main goal is to fix junior recruitment here. And that's what our whole company works towards.
What did you do before you started this company?
So before we started this company, we actually started it while studying together. We're three co-founders, myself from the Netherlands, Jorge, half Spanish, half German, and Philip from Germany. And so we actually started this while studying. But however, before studying, I was personally involved in several other startup projects.
Okay, and can you tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey?
So my entrepreneurial journey started relatively early. When I was 14, I was in international school in the Netherlands. And we were given this project for about 5 months where you're allowed to do pretty much whatever you wanted as long as you did a write-up on it.
Ooh.
And we had a family friend who was shutting down a store which had over 15,000 pieces of classic prints, art, so 19th, 20th century lithographies. And I was always a bit of a computer geek, and I said, can I sell these things for you online? I thought it was such a shame that the store was going offline. Well, offline. And so what I started learning a bit how to program, I learned a bit how to design, use Photoshop, and about 5 months later, after taking pictures of all of these 15,000 prints and launching an online store, I learned a big lesson is that build it and they will come does not apply on the online. But that actually worked out, and several months later, the whole inventory was sold.
Oh.
And that was my first foray into I didn't even know the word startup back then, but into having a little internet company, and since then I've been involved in different projects. Later on, I expanded a little bit as working as a freelancer, primarily as a programmer, but also as design freelancer. Yeah. Actually, no one here really knows, I think. Designs weren't too good. Moving forward into that, I worked a lot in the online publishing sphere. Okay. So actually having at one moment a network of over 1,000 sites that had writers working for it and continuously publishing content and making money in the old days of Google AdSense. Yeah. So it's not that lucrative anymore, but it used to be. And that moved into several other projects. A project which was built around a company working for Reed Elsevier in Germany, where we published a lot of the medical content online. And later on, after finishing my high school, a startup called Twallers, where we raised money for charities through Twitter. We were the first company to do so, and we worked with many big brands, and we had a lot of exposure at the time, and it was a great experience, and I found myself between Europe and San Francisco.
Cool. Let's talk about your business model of Tyba. Can you briefly explain what you exactly do?
So, Tyba exists to make it easy for companies to hire the right junior talent, so interns, but also people up to 4 or 5 years of work experience. And at the same time, we exist to make it much easier for that talent to find the opportunity at a job in a place that they love to be at. Yeah. So our mission is to fix junior recruitment. In terms of business model and how that works, we're completely free for the talent side, and we actually will always be. However, on the company side, at the moment they choose to actually want to interview candidates and later also hire them, that's where we charge them. And today we have a very strong focus on what we internally call sexy, fast-growing companies. Yeah. So startups are a very big part of that. And we're growing now across Europe and have been at most major hubs in Europe already, where we actually go and visit all of these companies and profile them on a new platform that's launching actually next month.
And how do you improve this matching between the people looking for a job and the sexy, fast-growing startups?
So one of the things that we do here is that we're very much a technology company. Can't see it, but behind here is a large engineering team.
And yes, that's right.
We have a very rigorous selection process of how we hire, and what we look at why we're such a technology-oriented company is that we believe that by the data that young people give us, information they fill out on our platform, so places they've studied, interests, books they've read, museums they've visited, lots and lots of what we internally call data points. At the same time, we learn from the companies very structured data about who they're looking for. Just essentially taking a job requirements and turning that into more structured information. What we then do is we have different algorithms. We have what we internally call our recommendation engine, which is similar to how today, when you rate a movie on IMDb or you look Netflix to suggest you movies, that technology, it's called recommendation engines, we apply that to matching. And at the same time, we do matching on what we internally call a semantic level.
Okay.
So one of the things, you're a young person, you graduate from, did you study business?
Yes.
So you studied business, and one of the things you might know is that there's about 50 different ways to name a business degree. Business administration, international business, management, I mean it goes on and on. So those are the synonyms. At the same time, there's things that are related to business, which essentially international marketing, sales, all of these things. So what we do is we take all those terms and what we internally call a mapping. So one of the things is that what we can do is we have a recommendation engine that works across hundreds and hundreds of different areas to do matching, but we also have all this very structured data that allows us to know when a young person tells us what they studied or what they're interested in or where they work, we know much more about it. So there's a lot of technical things. I won't go into too much detail. This is essentially the high level overview of how we do our matching, and we're continuously working on improving that.
How do you acquire the individuals using your platform?
So the biggest growth is our word of mouth.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, if you think about it, you get someone a job, I mean, they're going to tell their friends.
Okay.
And that's essentially the fundamental part of our business. There's obviously other channels when we enter into new markets. Sometimes it's paid acquisition. At the same time, we have a fantastic network of student ambassadors across Europe. They're currently 120.
Okay.
And they cover, I mean, some of the top schools, actually around the whole of Europe, from WHU to Copenhagen Business School to TU München to Berlin, everywhere, I mean, in Spain as well. And then there's a fourth channel is that we have partnerships with universities.
Oh, okay.
So today actually we have partnerships with schools such as LSE, King's College, and I can spout many more fancy names. Essentially what that means is that when we have interesting opportunities that match what we know that their students are interested in, they publicize them towards their talent.
For free or?
For free.
Awesome.
And we have this, I mean, with growing partnerships in many countries right now. Actually in the moment many partnerships are being closed in Germany.
Okay. Interesting. Is there some kind of built-in virality in your product as well?
So this concept of viral loops and growth hacking, and you send 3 invites to your cousins and whatnot, and we've played a lot around with that, and we had some initial traction actually doing that. But we realized that fundamentally it wasn't serving our mission. So what we actually said is, guys, when we do our job right, when we get people into jobs, we see that there's growth. When we see that we can give people real opportunities and do better than the status quo, which today is shitty job sites. And so we actually don't focus that much anymore, especially in the new platform that's launching, on send invites to here, or especially many of these sites which try to trick people into doing it. Virality works, in my opinion, and how we look at it, when there is something inherently viral to your product. A chat system like WhatsApp, where you cannot exist without actually writing with other people, that has some inherent virality. Tagging people in pictures because you want to notify other people about these things. But still, finding your job is quite a personal thing. And so there might be some things that we figure out in the future, but we haven't yet today.
Okay, interesting. Regarding the corporate strategy of you, what do you think are the most important drivers in order to become a very successful company? So,
corporate strategy, it's a totally overused word, and it's quite a fancy word as well. We look at essentially 3 different things. Look at what's the next 18 months for us. What's the next 3 years, and where do we want to be in 5 years. And when we get to 5 years, it's not strategy, it's vision. And our vision is to be the #1 player globally in junior recruitment. So this is where we want to get to. How we look at kind of the short and medium term in terms of strategy is that it's driven by a few things. It's driven by the basic metric of getting people placed into jobs. At the same time, our strategy is heavily focused on deciding where to go geographically and where to go in what verticals. So geographic expansion for us is when we want to own a continent, essentially, or part of a continent. So right now, between now and the end of the year, we're heavily expanding in Europe. We've been at most European cities yet. I think we're still missing Paris, which is happening in a few weeks. So by the time it's published, we'll be there as well. At the same time, we are starting in Southeast Asia. We have already been placing some people in jobs, although it's not a main market focus, in Mexico and Colombia. And these. So we're seeing for us that the opportunity is global. Everywhere you go to, companies are hiring young people. There's some cultural differences, and we can talk a little bit more about those in a bit. But overall, fundamentally, people graduating, people wanting to leave jobs and going into new ones, it happens everywhere. And yes, there's economic cycles, some countries that are booming and hence it's faster to grow. However, even here in Spain today, we see that companies struggle to hire young people, and this country has 50% youth unemployment. So it's not so much the fact of the talent availability, it's often a problem of matching, of actually search. So can the company actually reach the young people that it's looking for? Of course, a Google can reach anyone it's looking for. But if you're a startup with 50 people, and actually no one really knows who you are, it's not as easy sometimes to actually go get the talent on board. So it's a two-sided problem. It's a problem of being able to actually reach the talent, and after you reach them, to actually do the matching right. And we focus on both areas.
Okay. Eiso, you have made a very good, let's say, bridge for the market development of the, and I would like to understand how the market for recruiting differs between the European countries, and how the development over the last years had been happening.
So there's a few things that are interesting to note, and the first thing is the trends on the talent side. So one of the things where, and maybe you remember this from when you were graduating, is that everyone, maybe you're a bit too young, wanted to go into consulting and investment banking. And that's essentially, you go to any graduating class 6-7 years ago, a bachelor in business from any of the schools, or masters or MBAs, it was investment banking, consulting. So I'm talking about business talent now, which is essentially social sciences is the big gross of volume of graduating talent in Europe, with engineering and sciences being next. Today that's starting to differ. And Germany's a very good example, Berlin's a very good example of this as well, for the good and for the bad, that all of a sudden there's 3 options for a business student graduating, and not just for business students, by the way, it's for engineering, it's on other sides as well, is that it's no longer just about the traditional corporate brands, the Goldman Sachs, the PwC, Accenture, Deloitte, all of the names that we can rattle off, but startups have become a real possibility, and people are excited about them. And this is a trend we see in Europe. It's a trend we see in the US. It's a trend that's not yet happening in Asia or South America or the Middle East. And in Europe and the US, it is fundamentally built on 2 things. It's built on the fact that we're a generation that's been told to be happy. And it's a generation that's starting to realize that when they're talking to their friends or people who are a little bit older about what's it like to work at Goldman Sachs, what's it like to work at Booz & Company. I was for a little while at Booz & Company. Well, guys, I never leave the office for 2 a.m. I never have weekends. I get shouted at a lot, and it goes on and on and on and on. So people have become a little bit more spoiled in a good way, and sometimes in a bit too extreme. And this, builds up on everything that we've seen, from the Steve Jobs speech given at Stanford, that's had a big impact on this generation, to Mark Zuckerberg, coming and being a role model. And there's a lot of things that you can add on to this to say, why did we get to this point? And the fact that many children today are from divorced homes, and so this whole happiness and wanting to be happy not just in your life but also in your career matters today. And startups are a great outlet for that, because they allow people to focus on the things they care about most in their first years of their job. And it's not money. It was money of maybe 2 decades ago. It's still money today in several more developing economies. But actually purpose, mastery, so being able to get better at learning in your skill. All of these things, the team that we get to work with, are much more important factors today for young people to decide where they want to work than the exact dollar or euro amount on their paycheck. So this is a little bit about the trend on the talent side. On the company side, we're seeing several trends as well. Corporate companies are starting to realize that these things are happening, and they're starting to adapt. Not all of them yet, and many aren't yet, but we're seeing more and more great companies starting to realize that talent today is not there to stay for the next 20 years. And they're starting to accept that and sometimes be okay with it. I've seen examples, I won't name the exact companies, but the big, large multinational companies that say, we want you to be here 1 or 2 years, and then we want you to leave our company. We want you to go work abroad in another company, and we would love to have you back 3 years later. Or we want to go develop you. We want to actually because they realize they cannot no longer retain someone for 20 years in the same company. Because that's not the reality of us anymore. And so this is one major trend that we're starting to see happen. At the same time, we see a bigger growing volume of startups happening in Europe and the US, and hence being an actual labor market. There is significant volume today that can actually be considered a real labor market. There's some EU reports that just came out trying to estimate the size, and millions of jobs being created through some of these new companies. Mm-hmm. So this is another thing where we see that startups take, it's a new company that's being founded, doesn't have legacy. So they take and look around and say, what are the best practices in recruiting, in HR, in managing people, in policies, all of these things, and they're implementing those. So it means that a lot of the legacy stuff of existing corporate companies, the strictness about hours or about holiday policies or things like this, is starting to change in startups, because they're taking and they're saying, okay, this hasn't worked in the past, this is what's applicable to today's youth. And then what we see, just the funny thing is that the big companies then copy from the startups again, and it ends up being quite an interesting cycle.
Okay, and in terms of the difference between the recruiting markets, between, for example, in Europe, between Germany and around, can you tell us something about that?
So there's a few things we see. Obviously, there's economies in Europe that are doing better than others. Yeah. So we have the southern economies that are, Spain actually is starting to kick up and strengthen quite a bit now at the moment. Mm-hmm. And we've been through the peak of the recession here now since about last month, actually, and similar in the US and other places. But there's still high youth unemployment. Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece, Ireland as well. And we see that there are talent flows happening from these countries to Northern European countries where there's huge demand for especially engineering talent. This is usually only limited by language. So in countries where English or in German or case is not as well taught or not as well spread, we see still some of the barriers of those flows. But the willingness of the talent is huge. Yeah. People are starting to move more inside Europe because they have to. Yeah. So this is something that's very interesting. We do see that there's many countries that people return to after a few years. It's pretty hard to live in Spain and to go to Germany and be under grey skies most of the year and then actually decide after 2-3 years you want to stay there the rest of your life. Okay. So we do actually reality see that these things bring people back to their countries. Okay. So it's something that many people say, yes, there's a lot of outflow and there's people coming. Actually, there's as much people coming back in time periods as they're leaving. Okay. And it might not be purely reflected in the immigration numbers yet, but we see this already happening, and we'll see that this, as the economy strengthens in the southern countries again, we expect a lot of young people to return to their homes.
Okay. Eiso, we always try to help our first-time entrepreneurs with some advice from other entrepreneurs. And I think you have one or two very interesting learnings that you would like to share with our readers.
So, I have no idea. Actually, the first thing I'm going to tell you is that any piece of advice anyone's going to give you might work for you, might work for me, but it might not work for someone else. And that's one of the main things that we've learned is that, yes, you can gather advice from people, and you should always, and what we do actually here is we start with reading blogs and books. We then start talking to experts, our advisors, and then actually come up with a summarized conclusion. But one of the things that we've learned is that the experience that has helped our company might not actually help another company. But the way we approach actually looking at gathering advice and going through it systematically through these kind of steps has helped us a tremendous amount. I'm able to sit here and our whole company able to exist on the shoulders of many fantastic people who have helped us over the last years. That's a bit about general advice about advice. I don't know how useful that is, but some more concrete pieces of advice. We believe that people in your company are everything. We believe that the number one asset for any startup is not its app or its money in the bank, but it's actually the people that sit there. As a startup, you're trying to disrupt, in most cases, an existing industry, or you're trying to change something that's the status quo, or trying to introduce something new, and you have to move faster than everyone else. You have to do it better. And that only works if you have the right people in your company. How we do our recruitment here is that we focus it on essentially two main areas. We don't care so much about the formal education that you've had, or your age, or where you're from, or even the languages you speak, as long as we can communicate together. We care about the fact that you have a high willingness and ability to always be learning. And that is incredibly important for us. Because as you come into a startup, it's a dynamic environment. There's a lot of things always changing. There's a lot of new projects coming up. Your role might even change over time. and we need people there who can consistently actually keep on getting better at their jobs. So this is a little bit very concrete in terms of how we're a recruitment company who genuinely believes that recruiting is actually the pillar of our success. And then a little bit of cliche advice. You can't see it, but I'm actually reading it from the wall behind. And it says, it's really hard to beat the team that never gives up. And actually someone in my company wrote this the other day on our About page. And when Chuck was writing this, I said, this is exactly what defines what we've been doing for the last 3 years with this company. A relentless and continuous focus on having a mission and wanting to succeed at that mission, and being able to tackle whatever comes at you. You'll probably heard this, the word emotional roller coaster a lot, where in the morning, you think you're on top of the world with your company, and in the evening you think that the whole thing is about to fall apart because a deal fell through in between. Manage that roller coaster. Get enough sleep. Be able to, and know the fact that you're in a roller coaster. There's always ups and there's always downs. With a little bit of luck, you're going to get to the finish line.
Thank you very much, Eiso.
Thank you.
One cool thing, especially with the Tyba entrepreneurial insights relation, would be if you somewhere in the future want to start a company, good start would be just using Tyba, get into a startup company, learn some skills, and then continue reading entrepreneurial insights, and then you have all that you need for starting a great company.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.